Okay, I'm starting now.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Brett McDowell, the Executive Director of the FIDO Alliance. Thank you for joining me for the first webinar of 2016. We will be scheduling public webinars to give you updates on all things related to FIDO standards, the FIDO ecosystem, on a monthly basis throughout 2016. And I'm really looking forward to today's theme, where I get to really focus on how 2015 went for the FIDO Alliance and the FIDO ecosystem, and looking back at what we achieved and what that suggests around the continued momentum in 2016. So I'm going to start by providing the overview of what is the FIDO solution, why were we formed, and who comprises the FIDO Alliance. Then I'm going to go into the updates, where I'm going to look at the momentum that we achieved in 2015. And at the end of today's session, we will have open Q&A. So I will try to get to that with plenty of time to answer any questions you might have. So FIDO Alliance was formed to address a very pressing problem in the marketplace. Essentially, it boils down to data breaches. So here is the latest data on measuring the problem of the data breach from 2015. So again, we had over 780 data breaches in 2015. This is from the Identity Theft Resource Center. We were over 780 in 2014, but we are up almost 50% on the number of personal records that were exposed because of those data breaches. In 2015, that was 170 million. And we are also increasing the cost of each of these breaches, up to nearly 4 million per breach. That's a 23% increase over the last 2 years, according to the study from the Poneman Institute. So the problem is bad and only getting worse. Here are some highlights from the 2015 Data Breach Investigations report published by Verizon. 95% of these incidents involve harvesting credentials stolen from customer devices, then logging into web applications with them. 95% of the web app attacks that they studied come down to the harvesting of weak and poorly managed credentials, essentially passwords. And here is the primary pattern that they identified in their study. Look through the details of these incidents, shows a common sequence: phishing the customer, getting the credentials, abusing the web application, and here they were specifically focused on the financial services sector, emptying the bank or Bitcoin account. So the world has a password problem. The FIDO Alliance was formed to solve that problem with a fundamentally new approach to authentication. So I'm going to talk about the last industry response to the challenges of passwords, and that was one-time passcodes, which have been with us for many years now. This was not a fundamental new approach to authentication over the password. This was essentially adding a second password or passcode that times out and is delivered in a variety of mechanisms. One-time passcodes do improve security, but they're not easy to use, and ultimately they're still phishable. So we need a fundamentally new model, something that is designed from the very beginning to address the vulnerabilities that we've seen be exploited continuously against the password and the one-time passcode. And that is the Fast Identity Online FIDO, online authentication using public key cryptography. That's what's at the heart of FIDO. That's what all the FIDO specifications have in common. is online authentication is done using public key cryptography. So I'm going to now talk about how FIDO works, but as I get into the FIDO solution, I also want to highlight how we approach the problem so you can appreciate what is fundamentally different and why FIDO is catching fire, as you'll see in the adoption updates. So the old paradigm for user authentication was a simple continuum where you had to pick where you wanted to fit on this continuum in terms of your authentication options. You want more usability? Then you need to dial down on security. You want more security? Then you're going to have to dial down on usability, or really dial up on user inconvenience, adding more steps, asking more questions, etc. When we started the FIDO Alliance, we rejected that paradigm, and we felt like the only way that we're going to achieve our mission of introducing a truly new and fundamentally different authentication scheme for the industry is to improve the usability simultaneously with improving security. With the introduction of one-time passcodes, like I said, they do improve security, but because it actually reduced usability, we see consistently very poor adoption rates of people turning on and sticking with one-time passcodes as a second factor of authentication. So we knew right from the beginning we're going to have to improve usability as an initial design criteria for the FIDO solution. So now I'll get into how FIDO works. And again, I'm going to start with how have we been authenticating users from a very simple architectural perspective. So the old mechanism we would call shared secrets, or symmetric shared secrets to be more specific. The secret that the user has and wields is the same as the secret that the server is looking for, waiting for. So whether that is a passcode or a one-time or a password or a one-time passcode, it has to be introduced by the user, typed in the same way that the server expects to receive it, which opens it up to a lot of vulnerabilities. If you are tricked as a user to give away your password, then now you have a third party who has intercepted the secret and can wield the secret on your behalf. That's the way shared secret credentials work. What we did with FIDO is we introduced a very simple but very powerful shift in the authentication architecture. We introduced this concept called the FIDO Authenticator. So now we are doing a two-step process with every FIDO authentication. On the left-hand side of this diagram, we are able to do a local user authentication to their personal device. So this is the user verification step in FIDO authentication. This allows us to optimize what the user needs to do to prove that they are the right user to their local personal device, and we can optimize for usability. This is the part of the authentication paradigm where the user is involved. So here we can optimize and improve usability by using best-of-breed techniques. On the right-hand side of this diagram, this is where the personal device is authenticating the user to the online service using public key cryptography. We can optimize for security on the right-hand side of this diagram. And the security solution that has really stood up to the test of time has been public key cryptography. So now I'm going to introduce the FIDO standards. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how each of these actually work. Universal Authentication Framework, or UAF, and Universal Second Factor, or U2F. These are the two protocols that comprise the FIDO 1.0 suite of standards. You can really understand these by looking at them based on the user experience that they facilitate. So first we'll talk about the passwordless experience, where you're replacing the use of a shared secret with typically your FIDO authenticator is going to use biometric verification and then it's going to do for the local authentication, and it's going to do online authentication using public key cryptography. So it's as simple as 1, 2, 3 in step 1. The server sends an authentication challenge to the user's personal device. In step 2, there's a local biometric user verification step, although it's important to point out that it doesn't have to be biometrics. It can be, for example, a PIN or a pattern. There are other techniques being used. And then in step 3, the device authenticates you to the server using public key cryptography. And I'll show you that in the next slide. Now, the second set of standards is U2F. Now we're looking at the second factor experience. So step 1 here starts after the user has already typed in a username and password, or perhaps a mobile number and PIN, but some credential that's most likely a shared secret credential. So in step 1, after the server verifies the user account and the shared secret first factor, it challenges the user for their second factor. In step 2, instead of needing to go find the screen that has your 6-digit one-time passcode and having to type that in before it expires, in step 2 with FIDO U2F, it's a much better user experience. You can insert your FIDO authenticator into your computer and just simply touch it. Or a lot of the form factors are designed to simply live in your computer long term. So you're just reaching down to the side of your computer and touching something. It's that simple. And there are other modalities available, and I'll talk to you more about what we did in 2015 to add wireless capabilities to these U2F authenticators above and beyond USB slots. In step 3 with a U2F authentication event, you are still signing that challenge and sending the signed challenge to the server. So you're being authenticated in the same fundamental way, which is the online authentication takes place using public key cryptography. So to get started, whether you're using UAF or U2F, you start out by registering your FIDO authenticator with the service. So in step 1, you're being invited by your online service provider to register your account. You're already in a trusted session, you've authenticated using some legacy session, or perhaps you're creating a new account with the service provider, and you're going to establish your FIDO authenticator as your initial credential. So after you're being invited to authenticate in step 2, the user approves, yes, I do want to register my authenticator. And then in step 3, whatever the local user verification method was, triggers permission to the FIDO authenticator to create a key pair specific to that account with that service provider. So if we're talking about, Brett McDowell at emailaccount.com username, and let's say my PayPal account, then in step 3, I'm getting a key pair created specifically for Brett McDowell at emailservice.com PayPal account. So this is not, we're not reusing the key pairs, we're minting key pairs, key handles specific to the accounts. And then in step 4, the public key is provided to the online service provider and kept in the database with your service, so that later, now we'll look at FIDO authentication. When I return to the service and I need to prove who I am, in step 1, the online service pushes the FIDO challenge to your device. Step 2, whatever the user verification method is invoked. And so now the user has to prove that they're the same user they were when they registered this authenticator. And typically that could be biometrics, or as a second factor, they're giving presence. And then in step 3, that gives permission to the authenticator to now sign the challenge with the correct and specific private key for that account. And then in step 4, signed challenge is sent to the server, and you're logged in because the server has a public key that they can use to verify the signature on the signed challenge. So that's the basic flow for FIDO, whether it's UAF or U2F. And now we'll look a little deeper into each one of them. And really, what are these authentication mechanisms doing for you? Going back to the architecture I introduced at the beginning of the talk, FIDO UAF, on the left-hand side of this diagram, it's using, again, typically biometric techniques to confirm that it's the same user that enrolled the first time. And then on the right-hand side of the diagram, it's confirming that it's the same authenticator that registered before. So in the terminology of multi-factor authentication, on the left-hand side, you're getting a what you are authentication factor. And on the right-hand side, you're getting a what you have authentication factor, or a multi-factor authentication event. There's also some other features in FIDO and the attestation and metadata. So we do have a metadata service that the FIDO Alliance makes available to FIDO certified servers, so they can register information about each of these FIDO authenticators. And this is a diagram that shows you how that would be used and why that's useful to relying parties who deploy FIDO. So on the left-hand side, you have your FIDO authenticator. When you're first registering to the FIDO server, you're sending a signed attestation object to the server. Now, the server needs to know somehow, it needs to have a trust anchor of some kind to verify that that is a trusted authenticator, if that's a check that they choose to perform. And what we're doing is you're providing metadata services for the FIDO servers, so that these servers can register, basically subscribe to a feed from the FIDO Alliance and keep current information about what are the known good authenticators out there on the market today. And then if there is an authenticator compromise, we can actually update the metadata to reflect that as well. So this becomes a good tool for risk management for the relying party. And the metadata comes with statements that the authenticator manufacturer has chosen to put in their metadata. So this is from the authenticator creator. And so you will know, someone might claim, okay, this does fingerprint, this does voice. We're using secure elements to protect our private keys. We're using trust execution environments to do all the crypto to keep it out of shared memory space from applications. So this is the type of information vendors might choose to put into their FIDO authenticator metadata. Again, the purpose here is to serve the needs of the relying party, which is the online service provider. So now I'll walk you through a very simple demo of UAF in action. Here we will look at PayPal flow. So here you're looking to check out. You're challenged for user verification. PayPal recognizes that this device has a FIDO authenticator that's been previously registered. So after a successful user verification step, they're also showing you the details of the transaction. And after you confirm that those are the correct details, you're sending all of that signed back to the PayPal server, and they're using their public key to verify the signature on that signed authentication challenge and transaction, and the payment goes through. It's a very much improved user experience because all you're doing is touching a sensor on your device, and it's very much improved security. You're no longer dependent on the shared secrets, which are so vulnerable, as the data shows. Now let's take a look at FIDO U2F. So here, you're already using another factor, probably a username and password, to establish, which account that it is you're trying to get into. But the security is really coming from the FIDO authenticator as the second factor. And the first thing that you're getting, kind of on the left-hand side of this diagram, is there a user presence? This is sort of like a human CAPTCHA, if you will. You're verifying that it's a real user you're trying to authenticate right now. This is not a bot trying to make multiple attempts to brute force their way into the account. On the right-hand side of the diagram, again, this is very much the same as UAF, where you're getting, this is the same authenticator that registered with me before. You're getting a cryptographic proof that that is true. So a very strong what I have authentication factor. Now let's take a look at FIDO U2F workflow. So first, you're challenged for your first factor, in this case, email address and password. Then you're challenged, here you want to make sure that you have your second factor. In this case, it is a second factor U2F compliant device that lives in the laptop long term, so it's already there. Now you're challenged by the web application to say, go ahead and confirm using your security key, touch the device. And once you touch the device, sign challenge is sent through and you're authenticated into your service, in this case, Gmail. So the initial premise was that FIDO was going to improve usability and improve security. And hopefully you've seen how we've done that. But now I'm also going to talk about privacy and how FIDO Alliance has developed all of the specifications using privacy by design principles. So just a quick step back, what is privacy by design? So Ann Kevorkian invented this term as the Privacy Commissioner of Ontario. And the idea was to try to bring privacy into engineering as a discipline of engineering. And developed these 7 principles, which are sort of a rule book and have been for many years now, for how to design privacy into your system a priori. And these are the principles that we followed when we were looking at FIDO. You can see specifically how we have incorporated privacy by design principles into the FIDO Alliance principles by going to our website and downloading the Privacy Principles white paper that we published in early 2014. But to summarize, I'm going to walk through some specific capabilities that we have, and you can see it play out in an actual flow diagram of a FIDO authentication event. So there are no third parties in the protocol, it's a point-to-point protocol. There are no secrets generated or stored on the server side. Biometric data, if used, never leaves the device. And there's no linkability between services or accounts. You can always deregister at any time. And there's no release of information without consent as part of our requirements in the principles. So let's see how this plays out. Again, the familiar diagram. User on the left, server on the far right, FIDO authenticator mediating the authentication event. So in step 1, let's say you've launched an app. TLS channel is established through to the FIDO server, and the FIDO authenticator can now communicate securely. And here's an example. It's point-to-point. There's no third party in the protocol. The next step, now you've authenticated. Here we're talking about registration because registration is one of the key areas where you look at privacy. You really want to scrutinize what are we really turning over to the relying party about my device? What am I giving away? You're familiar with all of the privacy sensitivities around super cookies, and so this would be where you'd wonder, is the FIDO protocol introducing something where I could be tracked online? And so we'll demonstrate that that's not being done here. So you authenticate and you say, yes, I want to register. So you're invited to register your authenticator. And so here we see the principle, no release of information without your consent. You don't have to register your FIDO authenticator. You can opt out right off the bat. The next step, here you're doing that local user verification step we talked about before, which gives the local FIDO authenticator permission to create that key pair for you. So here, there are no secrets generated or stored on the server side. You can see it play out this step in the process. And now you've registered your public key with FIDO server, as we described earlier. Here's an example. The biometric data, if it's used, never leaves the device. The only thing going to the server is the signed challenge. for authentication, and the only thing going to the server during registration is the public key that they can use to verify those signed challenges in the future. Now, FIDO registration across multiple websites, right? This is where you'd be concerned about device-specific authentication from a privacy perspective. You'd want to know that we weren't introducing any sort of super cookie that can be used to track us around the web. And hopefully you've seen that there is no linkability between accounts and services. Therefore, there is nothing the FIDO protocol is introducing that would let website A understand, what you might have done or where you registered on website B. And here's a diagram to kind of show you where FIDO-related data is relative to the rest of the data that is going to be exchanged during a typical session with a web application. So application-specific data, such as shipping address, credit cards, personal information that you might be storing in the online application, is out of scope for FIDO. We're just establishing the authentication, and then once you're in a trusted authenticated session, and that's downstream from FIDO. The user verification data, which is related to the FIDO authentication event, for example, biometrics data that you might be using for the user verification step, this is controlled in terms of privacy principles of FIDO on how it is treated, and compliance to the privacy principles is a requirement of FIDO certification. And then you have the FIDO-specific data, which is actually enforced by the way the protocol works, such as the identifiers. And this is basically the public key, the key handles, and the private key, and how these things are managed. So just to reinforce those things, all the FIDO-related data, the private key, any biometric information stays on the device. The only thing being shared, basically non-secret, public keys or key handles. So in summary, the FIDO solution delivers better security, which is important for online services. It introduces reduced cost for the enterprise, because now the enterprise can invest once in a standards compliant infrastructure and use any different type of authenticator that they might want to introduce to their customers or their users. They don't have to do an expensive integration each and every time they want to work with a new type of authenticator. You don't have to do a big integration on face and then go do another big integration on voice, another big integration on fingerprints. You can just do a FIDO integration and then work with whatever is out there. And it's simpler and safer for consumers in ways that they'll never, need to understand. But we know that all of those vulnerabilities that are being exploited that I reported on at the beginning of the talk, that led to 95% of the breaches that were investigated in the Verizon report, those vulnerabilities simply don't exist in the FIDO authentication flow, because we're using asymmetric cryptography with protected private keys on a local device. We're not using shared secrets. Now I'll say a few things about the FIDO Alliance itself, and then we'll get into highlights from 2015. And then we'll have Q&A. So the FIDO Alliance is a nonprofit organization, and it's an open industry association with now over 250 members from around the world, with very strong representation from Asia, Europe, in addition to North America. The scope is very tight. FIDO is not an identity management standard setting organization. We are an authentication standard setting organization, specifically looking at the piece in everyone's identity management architecture where you currently see passwords or one-time passcodes. That's where FIDO shows up, and that's the only place FIDO shows up. We're also not saying that FIDO authentication is a silver bullet and it solves everything. We're recognizing that modern authentication does require intelligent risk authentication on the back end, so that you can decide whether or not this authentication should be coming from this location and doing these types of transactions. So we don't displace that capability. We're just introducing a much stronger first signal into what is a multi-signal decision-making process in any modern authentication infrastructure. The mission of the Alliance is very simple. We develop technical specifications. We operate programs to ensure the broad industry adoption of those specifications. And over time, we will pursue formal standardization of all the technical specifications that we develop. So now, I can't go over all of the members in detail, but I do want to highlight, at least categorically, the member companies that sit on the board of directors, because this is the collection that is making the strategic decisions for the FIDO Alliance. And what I want to demonstrate here is that we have the critical mass of global leaders in their various fields that represent market leaders on both the supply side for authentication and the demand side. So we can bootstrap this ecosystem with a very strong set of critical stakeholders. So starting with the online services who are building these applications that need better, simpler authentication. So here we have leaders from financial services, payments as well as banking, and from around the world. Devices and platform vendors, so both operating systems as well as hardware devices, the OEM, if you will. These are the companies that are going to put FIDO capabilities into the market, sort of the supply side. You can't really perform a FIDO authentication event if you have just one of these two categories. Just because a website turns on FIDO authentication, you're still not going to be able to use FIDO authentication if it's not something that's available to you on your device, and vice versa. And then critical enablers, the companies that are making the components that are building FIDO capabilities right into the silicon. Companies like ARM, Intel, NXP, Qualcomm. Also, key enablers for the enterprise. Companies like Vasco and RSA, Knock Knock Labs, and others that are working to help enterprises secure their authentication systems. UAF, makers of the second factor devices, one of many at this point, but a real market leader in bringing FIDO to it. These companies and Daon and Synaptics, biometrics experts, so we have thought leadership in their specific area of expertise, as well as very broad impact on the industry in terms of pushing out millions, hundreds of millions of devices to users, and of course service providers who are serving hundreds of millions of users. So this is how we've been able to get as far as we've gotten, and why we believe that FIDO is the future of authentication. So now let me get into some 2015 highlights and updates. In 2015, we introduced a new membership category for governments. This was in response to demand by several government agencies who wanted to be more involved in FIDO. But they saw that FIDO was the future of authentication for their interests, and they wanted to have a seat at the table to make sure that we at least knew their requirements, and they could see where things were going and prepare for that, to take advantage of the technology as early as possible. And we have signed up a number of agencies from United States, Europe, and Asia. In 2015, we also introduced an industry liaison partnership program. This has allowed us to formally partner with several other trade associations to collaborate on whether it's technology standards, like our collaboration with the Bluetooth SIG, or if it's to collaborate on simply educating the public and bringing FIDO to market. And this is a growing base. We'll probably double this number in 2016. In 2015, we also saw quite a bit of adoption of FIDO technologies. Now, coming into 2015, in 2014, we didn't even have any finished FIDO specifications. The FIDO specifications were complete, at the very end of 2014. So 2015 was the first year we had final specs. That being said, in 2014, we actually did see some early adoption of FIDO technology in the working draft stage from PayPal, Google, and Alibaba. So in 2015, I'd like to highlight a few of these, and then we'll see this again on sort of a master timeline for 2015. From early announcements from Microsoft and Qualcomm, where they announced that they were going to put FIDO capabilities right into their platforms. So the significance of that is Windows 10 and the entire footprint of Windows 10 devices, as well as cloud-based services from Microsoft. And then Qualcomm, for those of you who don't know their footprint, Snapdragon modules and Qualcomm chipsets drive over 1 billion Android devices, just speaking to the Android market. Then Google announced that they were bringing FIDO U2F security key capabilities to the enterprise, the first scalable deployment of FIDO for enterprise. So they introduced how you would have to manage FIDO credentials and gave enterprise CIO departments tools to do that. And NTT Docomo deployed FIDO UAF and has since certified 10 different handsets available in Japan. Those are available worldwide to do local biometric authentication and FIDO authentication online. And this ties into Docomo's Docomo ID program, which enables Docomo subscribers to access over 100 different online services, using simple biometrics. Now, everyone seems to be pretty familiar with fingerprint authentication on smartphones. It's becoming quite popular. But NTT Docomo also broke new ground in May of last year when they introduced iris authentication. So they have phones that do iris as well as fingerprint authentication. Dropbox deployed FIDO U2F following a similar deployment pattern that Google introduced. Bank of America was the first bank to introduce FIDO authentication. They deployed FIDO UAF in their mobile banking app. And the other significance of that, besides being the first application to use FIDO authentication for banking, it also was the first to support iPhones at scale. So that runs on both Android and iPhones. And then GitHub deployed FIDO U2F in the fourth quarter of 2015. And GitHub went one step further, and they decided to be quite the technology evangelist for FIDO authentication, giving away security keys and really promoting developers to protect their source code with strong FIDO unphishable two-factor authentication. These deployments are enabled by FIDO certified products. Something else we introduced in 2015 was the FIDO certification program. And I'm very pleased to show you the next slide, reinforced by an announcement we made just earlier this week, that over 100 different products have now been certified from over 50 different companies. Here is a look at all the companies that are shipping FIDO certified solutions today. And this is a testament to the momentum that the FIDO ecosystem has. This certification program is only 8 months old. And in, I think it's 3 rounds of testing, we've now tested and certified over 100 different products. And this is quite well balanced across both UAF and U2F. Certification program, for those of you who might be interested in it and have not yet participated, very simply, you can go to our website and start the self-certification process. You can register for a vendor ID and then get going with the self-conformance test tools that we make available, followed by formal interoperability testing that is done under the observation of a proctor, and then followed by the legal binding paperwork, trademark license, and your commitment to stand behind your implementation. And then for the end of last year, we had another major milestone. Speaking to our momentum, FIDO authentication is now poised for continued growth as we submitted FIDO 2.0 Web API and associated specifications to the W3C. The W3C has since accepted that submission and has put it in as a baseline foundation for the new web authentication working group that they're forming. This is positioning FIDO authentication as the future for how the web platform in its entirety is going to perform authentication going forward. So we couldn't be happier with the relationship we have with the W3C and the kind of future proofing around FIDO authentication that this confirms. And now I'll want to pause here and lay this all out for you in one picture. This summarizes on a timeline what I've been reporting to you today in terms of what a big year 2015 was for us. From Microsoft, Qualcomm, Google, Entity Docomo, Dropbox, Bank of America, and GitHub, all announcing their FIDO deployments at scale, UAF and U2F, FIDO certification program, again, over 100 different products certified. We also added Bluetooth and NFC capabilities to FIDO U2F. So what started out as a very good solution for desktop computing and laptop mobile computing is now a very good solution for handset mobile computing. Any device that can talk Bluetooth or NFC can be enabled as a FIDO U2F authenticator. We introduced the government program, and we have signed up representative agencies from North America, Europe, and Asia, and that program continues to grow. Then in October, we announced the Liaison Partnership Program. We now have 13 different industry partners, and that is growing. And of course, we topped off 2015 with our submission to the W3C and that ongoing partnership to formally standardize FIDO as the core authentication mechanism for the web platform. So in summary, where we stand today, looking ahead at 2016, the action for you, if you're a relying party building web applications or mobile applications, deploy FIDO 1.0 support today. Whether that's UAF or U2F, depending on the use cases you want to enable, FIDO 1.0 is deployed at scale already. It is working, and more relying parties are deploying the solution with hundreds of millions of devices out there to take advantage of it. If you're a handset manufacturer or a PC manufacturer, look at what we just submitted to the W3C. Make sure that your hardware designs are built with FIDO 2 in mind, so you can take advantage of that when the operating systems bring FIDO capabilities right into the core platform. And if you are a vendor selling authentication solutions to the enterprise, get your authentication capabilities FIDO certified. This is clearly where authentication is going, and it is already where authentication is at for many market-leading organizations. So join the FIDO ecosystem, deploy, start piloting, do a proof of concept, get involved, and if you want to be directly involved in the technical work that we're doing, in the outreach work that we're doing, in some of the public policy work that we're doing, then I would invite you to join the FIDO Alliance. We're open, any organization can join, and I'd be happy to talk to you about that more. You can send an email through our website, or you can contact me directly, brett@fidoalliance.org. So with that, I'd like to open it up for questions.
Thanks so much, Brett. So far, we don't really have any questions. The only one we do have is if we're going to receive this presentation at the end of this webinar, and I can answer that one. This webinar will be, or a recording of it will be available on our website by the end of this week, FIDOalliance.org.
Natasha, why don't you remind folks how to submit a question?
Yes, please just submit your questions on the within the question pane on the control panel within GoToWebinar. And I did get one question now. What is FIDO doing to address user privacy?
So I did go through how we designed FIDO authentication to address privacy. So for example, user privacy kind of kicks in when you're saying, well, how is my personal information being governed? Who has access to it? Who do I have to share it with versus who do I choose to share it with? And one of the things that FIDO has done in the design of the technology is that we have designed it so that the users are really living by that minimum, so that minimization principle of privacy by design, where you're not sharing anything that you don't have to share. So if you want to authenticate, taking advantage of some of the great usability innovations that really biometrics has introduced to us, and other capacitant-based systems like the sensors on most U2F tokens. If you want to take advantage of something that's as simple as touching it, looking at it, talking to it, you don't have to give up your biometric information to an online service. That all can be protected on your personal device and never shared, and not even accessible to other applications. And that's one of the things that we've done. It's probably the most significant thing that we've done in terms of protecting users' privacy.
Next question. What new consumer-facing FIDO rollouts do you see coming in 2016?
Well, so I have to admit that in the FIDO Alliance, it is a collection of companies, and these companies rarely share their plans, their detailed plans for when they're going to roll out a new technology, when they're going to announce a new product. In fact, it would be a violation of our antitrust policy to have members sharing details such as product plans and shipping dates. What we have seen are a couple of companies kind of choosing to take that rare step where they are pre-announcing their intentions because they want to ensure that there is confidence in the FIDO ecosystem, such as Microsoft's announcement that they will be supporting Windows 10 when FIDO 2.0 is complete. So I couldn't name any particular company that's going to adopt FIDO and roll it out. I can kind of connect the dots and make my own forecast to say that 2016 will see more adoption than 2015. And 2015's adoption, of course, dwarfed what we saw in 2014. So there is a lot of momentum, all the same indications of what companies are joining the Alliance, what companies are asking questions, what companies are really going into details on, all right, how do I actually roll this out? And one of the trends that I'll speak to is on the enterprise side. We've seen a lot of interest kind of suddenly toward the second half of 2015 in FIDO authentication for the enterprise. And in fact, one of the things that we're doing is we have just formed an enterprise group to focus on deployment issues related to enterprise. So our members are getting together and talking to each other about best practices for deploying FIDO within an existing enterprise identity management infrastructure, and how the different components fit together. So that group that we formed, the enterprise subgroup within our deployment at scale working group, is going to meet for the first time next week. And I anticipate that we're going to start publishing industry best practices. We've never done that before. We publish technical specifications, but now we're at the point where there's enough deployment where we can start publishing case studies and implementation guides based on real-world experience. And that's the kind of very specific kind of recipe book that a lot of organizations are looking for before they pull the trigger on their own deployment.
Great. Next question. Do you have any market data on sales dollars attributed to FIDO technologies?
No. Nor do we have market data on even more obvious questions, such as what is the current addressable market for FIDO. We're breaking that down within verticals. So to close that gap, since we have grown so quickly and a lot of these questions are coming to us and we're being seen as the industry's trade association thought leader for authentication, we are investing this year for the first time in market research. So we will be looking for industry analysts to partner with and to start quantifying some of this and including that information in future publications from the FIDO Alliance.
Great. We can get to one more question. For RP, what do you expect for adoption? Some users in and some out?
Yeah, so if you're a relying party today, if you're to deploy FIDO today, remember the diagram that I've shown at least 4 or maybe 6 times in the presentation today, where you've got that FIDO authenticator in the middle, and that is a capability of your personal device that can be built entirely in software. That can just be an app on your device. What we've seen in practice is that that's a device with some hardware capability enabled by the device manufacturer or a dedicated security device. So that does mean that some of your users will be able to authenticate to your service using FIDO, and some of you users will not. Not until we've really crossed that chasm and have distributed FIDO capabilities out to the long tail. Now, I think software implementations are going to be a great way to do that, to close that gap quickly. But for hardware-backed FIDO authenticators, that's going to be just the refresh cycle on personal devices, whether that's refresh on laptops, desktops, tablets, phones, or people will be picking up these dedicated, inexpensive security devices so that they can FIDO enable any of their legacy hardware. That's a great thing about U2F's adding NFC and Bluetooth capabilities. You can really bring FIDO authentication through a peripheral, through a dedicated separate device.
Great, thanks.
So it looks like we're at the end of our time. Thank you, Tasha, for running the webinar today. And thank you, everyone who attended. So I'm going to add to the answer we gave earlier. Yes, these slides are going to be available, and it'll be up on our website if you go into the events section on FIDOalliance.org. But also a recording of this webinar will be available. So if you have colleagues or partners, customers who you think would benefit who would have benefited from attending this, you'll be able to point them to this video, and they can hear what they missed out on if they weren't able to join today. Thank you again, and 2015 was a fantastic year. The worst, part of 2015 is that now we have to answer it with an even better year in 2016. And I'm really looking forward to that challenge. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.